So before I begin this sort of tirade and rant, I wanted to show you guys this really awesome shirt that I got from one of my buddies named Caleb, who was known as Ninja Mushi here on YouTube. He used to be a former collaborator of mine, and we worked together on a couple videos, and I was also featured on his podcast with another one of his buddies back in 2013 and 14. He kind of disappeared for a while, but he actually popped back up and told me he wanted to send this shirt to me that he wanted to send to me back in 2014. So I finally got it 4 years later. You can even see that down here he signed it 2014, so I did find that kind of funny. But hey, better late than never, and I really love this shirt. As you all know, I'm a big Captain America fan, so whenever I'm dressed up as the Star Spangled Man with a plan, along with my buddy Mew, I mean, it could never go wrong. So thank you so much, Caleb, for this awesome shirt. I really like it, and I cannot wait to continue wearing it for future videos to come. Too bad I decided to wear it for this video. Well, with that all said, hey guys, the Black Critic Guy. So last night, I finished watching 13 Reasons Why Season 2 with my buddy Laney, and upon finishing it, I was upset, I won't lie. I felt very let down, underwhelmed. I really did not like the second season. But I'm not really here to talk about the woes of the second season. I might actually do a separate video talking about all the problems that I had, particularly with the last episode. But I'm not here to really go into great detail as to why I didn't like the second season of 13 Reasons Why. I'm not here to talk about how the story was completely pointless, dealing with the lawsuit against the school that really added nothing to the story or the characters. In fact, the real lawsuit, the real trial, doesn't even happen till the last episode. Hell, I'm not even here to talk about the actual trial that should have been the main trial of the story that only lasts for 5 minutes in the last episode, which was an hour and 10 minutes long. I'm not here to talk about how that trial wasn't even about the trial. It was basically used as a vehicle, as a way to do this fucking PSA announcement to tell people that rape is bad and a lot of women have been abused and raped and sexually assaulted, you know, and you gotta speak up. A message that is poignant, but it works against the story you are trying to tell when you make it more about a message, a political statement, and a stance, rather than making it about what happens in the story. And I'm not kidding. They show one person telling her story about what happened to her in a moment of vulnerability, and then it cuts to various characters that have nothing to do with her story, with her rape, but it's them sharing their own experiences as if this was some type of open forum where everyone was sharing their stories. Hell, there was one character, I'll tell you her name was Mackenzie, who was sharing a story about being sexually assaulted. And this character was a very, very minor character in this season. We never really see her interact with any other person, so where did this story come from? And why is she even here? It only felt like she was there because she was one of the females that were in this show, so we had to put her in. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not here to really go into the details of some of the character defamation, character assassination that happens in Season 2. What I'm actually here to talk about is what really bothers me about the 13 Reasons Why TV series. And this is something that has bothered me since the first season. And that one nuisance, that one thing I want to talk about today is how the 13 Reasons Why TV series either completely forgot or missed the point of what the book was trying to do and what type of story and message it was trying to convey. It suffers from what I call the Hobbit syndrome. What's the Hobbit syndrome? That's basically where you take a relatively simple story and you expand and stretch it and add so many new details that it loses its original identity. It's no longer that original story. It's something else entirely. The Hobbit was supposed to be a simple, fun adventure story, almost a story for kids about Hobbit or about Bilbo Baggins teaming up with a bunch of dwarves to get back their mountain. It was a relatively simple story compared to the more complex story like Lord of the Rings. Everybody knows that. But what did the Hobbit trilogy actually turn out to be? Almost a mirror image of Lord of the Rings. So it's no longer the story about the Hobbit, it's just another addition to the Lord of the Rings saga. So it loses its original identity as being this simple story following Bilbo Baggins. Hell, Bilbo Baggins is not even the main character of his own story. We all know that because they focus so much on the damn dwarves, instead of focusing on who the character that the story's about, Bilbo Baggins. The same thing happens here in 13 Reasons Why. They took a relatively simple story about a kid receiving a package full of tapes that is from a girl that recently commits suicide, detailing the reasons why or what led to her suicide. And the whole story takes place in one night. It's just Clay listening to the tapes, going to these locations on a map that Hannah made herself to detail her own experience, her own story. Instead, the series becomes not only just Hannah's story, but everybody's story. And when it becomes everybody's story, it's no longer the story of Hannah Baker. Now, does that mean I don't like the changes? Absolutely not. I think some of the changes are warranted and great, especially because a lot of these characters in the books, they're very one-dimensional because we only get it from Hannah Baker's perspective, which is technically the point. But the fact that we do get more layers with the characters, we understand their internal struggles, their interpersonal relationships with other people, it makes us sympathize with these characters and shows us that Hannah wasn't always the best person as well. You know, she wasn't the only one that was in pain. She wasn't the only one that was dealing with issues. There were other characters dealing with that as well. I love that. But again, that goes into the whole thing where you can get completely lost in their stories, and now you're no longer focused on the main story, nor are you focused on the message. What is the message, you're probably wondering? The message has nothing to do, honestly, if you really think about it, it has nothing to do with suicide. It has nothing to do with interpersonal relationships. It has nothing to do with bullying. It has nothing to do with sexual assault, rape, lawsuits, going to trial, all that stuff that's thrown into the 13 Reasons Why series. None of those things have anything to do with what the main story was supposed to be, what the main message was supposed to be. And that main message was that you have to pay attention. Listen, observe, because you never really know what's going on in somebody's life. Somebody can be hurting and you're none the wiser. The book opens up with Clay meeting this girl, Sky, who's also in the show, and I have a lot to say about Sky. I cannot, but he meets this girl named Sky, and he's basically not very attentive to her needs. Clearly there's something up with her. She's pretty bothered about something, but he doesn't really care much about it. He's distracted in his own little world. And by the end of the story, after he went through the journey of listening to Hannah Baker's tapes, he comes to realize what Hannah's message was all about. It wasn't about, oh, woe is me, pity me, all that stuff. She wanted to tell her story. She wanted people to understand her psyche, where she was coming from, and what led her to making this decision, this terrible decision. And she even tells the listener right up front, reach out, listen, maybe see if someone else is hurting, be there for somebody. And what happens at the end of the book? Clay meets his friend Sky again, and he talks to her, tries to engage in a conversation. He breaks out of the shell of keeping to himself, of his isolationism, and starts to venture with Sky to wherever their story will lead next. That's great. That is powerful. That's impactful. And the message is very clear. And it didn't have to be shoved down our throats either. It's handled very, very artistically. Here in this show, can you really say that the main message of the show is about listening to people and understanding? Maybe to some degree, like maybe there's some parts of the story that is like that, but most of it is about, well, how much high school fucking sucks. Which anyone could tell you that. The thing is, there's multiple messages instead of one clear message. Because it gets bogged down by so many other elements. You have the message about sexual assault and consent. There's the message about, speaking out and talking to people. There's the message about what it doesn't mean to be a true friend, because that's another element of this of the TV series, where it's like, okay, which of us are truly friends? Are we all truly friends, or only some of us are truly friends? All these different types of story arcs, all these different types of messages, the original story, the original intent is completely lost in the onslaught of different types of stories. And that broke my heart. And not only that, the biggest problem too is that they never learned this lesson. None of the characters, to a certain degree, ever learned the lesson of, hey, maybe somebody might be hurting and we should be there for them. No one really does. Maybe, okay, one character. I'll give one character that. Zach. Zach might be the only character to learn that lesson, because in the second season he's there for Alex, who is in a very trying time right now. But other than him, who else has been there? I talked a little briefly about Skye and how I was upset with the way they portrayed her in the show. I mean, she's basically just a stand-in, that's it. And Clay didn't even learn his lesson. Like, sure, at the end of season 1, he starts, dating Skye and listening to Skye. I don't even think in the book it was implied that he had romantic feelings for Skye, but that he was trying to be there as a support for Skye, because she was dealing with something. And I would have been fine if they didn't date. I thought it would just be okay if they're just friends. But no, they start dating. Which does not end well in season 2. Now, nobody dies, just telling you. Nobody dies, but let's just say that relationship was doomed to fail from the start, because they had no chemistry. There was no connection with them. And basically, Skye turns into wistful girlfriend type character. Somebody that she's never been at all. In the context of the show itself, by the way. And again, it shows me that the creators didn't understand the message. When a majority of your characters are making the same mistakes, even though they all have heard the tapes, and they should have understood what the message was. Clay should have, at least. It seemed like he did at the end of the first season, but what happens in the second season? He doesn't really listen to Skye and her needs. He doesn't really realize that she's hurting deep down inside, because he's so bothered by everything that's happening with Hannah Baker, and that shouldn't be the case. Hannah's story is over. It's time to move on, and he's not moving on. The story becomes now about him dealing with the loss and moving on, rather than being about him learning the message, him understanding what Hannah was trying to tell him. It's not that. It's like, oh no, I have to move on from Hannah now. That's not the story. That's not what the story should have been. And it was just so distracting. As a super fan of this story, I loved 13 Reasons Why, the book. I loved it so much, it was the first ever book that I adapted into a screenplay. Now, of course, now I can't use that screenplay, but damn it, I loved it so much that I wanted to tell its story on the silver screen. And unfortunately did not get the chance to, but that's how impactful that story was. When I heard they were making a series, I got super excited. I wanted to see what they were going to do with it. And as much as I was impressed by the new additions, I was overall let down that they completely missed the point. Nobody learns. If anything, the thing that bothered me the most is what they did to Tyler, or what Clay did to Tyler, better yet. Taking that picture and sending it around, hello, that is the pure definition of bullying. You didn't learn your lesson. Had he been as fragile as Hannah was, he would have killed himself. and you would have been solely responsible for this. How could that not have gone through your head, Clay? I get it, you're all teenagers, you make mistakes, you don't think, you get emotional. I think they capture teenagers very well in the show to a degree, because there are times where they don't even act like teenagers, they act like young adults. But my point being is that them acting like it's always the end of the world, that's a teenager right there. Them blowing small little things out of proportion, that's high school right there. Them caring so much about their own public images and getting laid and being with girls and looking the prettiest, that's high school. I get that. That's very well done. But the fact that he never even apologized, by the way, for taking that picture. He never confronted Tyler and said, hey, I realized that, I put you through a lot of stress and strain by putting that picture out there. I embarrassed you in front of all these people. I'm sorry. And if you ever feel like you're in a dark place, or you ever feel like you have nowhere to turn, I'm here for you, buddy. If Clay actually reached out to Tyler as a friend, the little incident that almost happened at the end of season 2, which was a fucking cop-out, and again, I'll talk about that in a separate video, would have never happened. Because Clay at that point would have learned the lesson. His character would have had an arc. Instead, Clay goes through the classic definition of character assassination in this show. He becomes such an unlikable little shit, it's really hard to root for him. He's almost close to a scumbag. He's very not self-indulgent, but he's very selfish. He's very self-obsessed. He thinks that he's the good guy, but he clearly is not. Self-absorbed, that's the word I was thinking of. He might not admit it, but he's very self-absorbed. It's either his way or nobody else's way. I have to do this for Hannah. I have to do this for her. I have to bring justice for Hannah. He's so blindsided by his own thoughts and opinions of things, he doesn't see everything else that's happening around him and the people that actually need some help. Instead of worrying so much about what the fuck Bryce Walker is doing, why not help Jessica, who's dealing with so much trauma? Well, instead of asking her to testify against Bryce, maybe ask her what she's feeling. Why not bring Justin back into the fold, not as a way to help your case or to help Jessica, but because Jessica's hurting and she needs that assistance right now? Why can't you be more like Zach, who realized that Alex is hurting, he needs support, and no matter how much Alex pushes him away, he's always sticking by him? Or like Tony's new boyfriend. Small character, powerful role though. He's an example of somebody that listens to the pain of somebody else, no matter how hard it gets. That's the type of character Clay needed to be. That's the type of character he was in the book. He was listening, he was paying attention, he got the message. In this, he seems so delusional and somewhat psychotic too. In fact, my friend Lainey was bringing up the fact that in the first season they mentioned about him being on pills and meeting a psychiatrist. Something they never bring up in the second season. They never address any sort of mental health issue, although it clearly shows that he has some. Completely disregarded. And a good opportunity to kind of delve into mental health issues. If this show's going to tackle rape, sexual assault, lying, and doing drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, why not also tackle mental health? You're going to hit all those other things anyway. I couldn't believe what they did with Clay. I was so upset with the character assassination of him. And this goes back to the whole Hobbit syndrome. They should not have made Clay have a personal relationship with Hannah. I hate to do this, but hey, since Jay Asher was a part of the first season, this is based off of the book, I will hold the series accountable for not adding this in there. Clay was a very minor role in Hannah's life. They worked together in passing, but they never had a friendship. They kind of worked together, and he kept to himself. He was a shy individual. He didn't like interactions that much. He didn't like getting out of his comfort zone. The first time he ever did that was with Hannah at that party where they made out. And yes, that actually happened. They made out in the book. And his inclusion wasn't because he did something wrong. In fact, he was good to her. It's just that he wasn't there when she needed him the most. He wasn't there to listen. He was mostly there for action. And, you know, you can't really blame him. He's a teenager. Of course he's going to think more about with his dick than his brain. But he was such a small role. And it wasn't even that bad of a role. Here, they make it seem like they had this big relationship from the get-go. And then, you know, they started becoming more intimate instead of they went from friends to potential lovers. No. Keep it simple. Don't need to make it so complex to where they had a friendship. It's kind of like what they did in season 2, where they retcon so many things and add new elements that was never mentioned both in the context of the first season and in the books. It was like, where did this come from? Out of nowhere, they're like, oh, this actually happened too. How? And why wasn't this ever brought up? Not even hinted to. It was never hinted to, which means it was just thrown in there. Okay. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. 13 Reasons Why the series was a huge letdown. And maybe you can say that I'm being nitpicky because I'm such a big fan of the books and that it didn't really go the way that I envisioned it going. But even on a storytelling perspective, it doesn't convey the message right. And at the end of the day, as I told my friend, it just becomes another typical overly dramatic teen drama that deals with those heavy issues, yes, but a lot of those shows deals with those heavy issues now. A lot of them make those bold political statements that everyone thinks is so wow, I'm so impressed. Everybody does it now, so who cares? This story could have had so much nuance to it. Even in its simplicity, it could have had so much nuance to it. It shouldn't have been a TV series, in my opinion. It should have stayed a movie. Or it should have been a movie, I should say. You know, focus mainly on Clay's perspective, how he is hearing Hannah's words. It's only Hannah and Clay's perspective that we need to see in the story to effectively get the message. Because at the end of the day, the story of 13 Reasons Why is not solely Hannah's story. It's hers and everyone that's ever been in a situation or in a predicament like Hannah, who's ever felt cornered, whoever felt like they just have nothing to offer the world and they just want to end it all. And to be there for these people when they need it the most. That's the message of 13 Reasons Why. It's not about victimhood. It's not about rape. It's not about how sucky high school life is, although to an extent it's a part of it. Those are mostly elements to the much larger message. Anyway, I just had to vent all that out. Apologies if this video is long and rambly, but I had to just express myself. Thank you all for watching. I might make that video explaining why I freaking hate the last episode of 13 Reasons Why Season 2 because it's just abysmal. It's abysmal. In fact, that episode ruined the entire series for me. I'm like, wow, not only are you dickless, but now you're gonna shove down these very topical political messages. Like, come on, dude, I get it. You know, that you can convey it, but at least have some artistry, man. Don't be so freaking blatant about it. Well, I'm done now. I have an anime review that will be coming out on Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching. And as always, guys, if you'd like to see more videos of the channel, be a part of the Black Critic Crew, please hit that subscribe button below. Like this video, really enjoyed it. And I'm talking about the second, wearing this awesome shirt as the Black Critic Guy. Till then, peace, YouTube.
I've been searching for a trail to follow again. Take me back.